Okay, thank you everyone for joining today. I still see we have participants still lining up. Give us 1 second. We have with us today our distinguished panel of speakers here from BIA Southern California and Dan Dunmoyer from CBIA. I know our president, Tom Grable, has joined us today. We're going to see if we can unmute him real quick to have some opening remarks. If we are able to do that, please do.
All right, thanks, Jeff, and thanks, distinguished panel. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody today. Just a couple of things for the membership. This is obviously government affairs is a critical component about what we do, and with our renewed focus on our advocacy efforts, those are paying off in great dividends, and thanks to this team for playing critical parts in that. We've made a lot of progress over the past couple of months, despite what's been going on in the world around us. And so I want to pay respects and homage to this distinguished team for making those things happen. You'll hear a great deal of information about just what we're faced with and how these issues are being dealt with by staff and by our membership. And it's really gratifying to see just this groundswell that we're experiencing amongst our membership and being involved in the government affairs efforts. And I see this as a continuing trend that will gain momentum exponentially as we see the successes that we already have. Also, just on another note, on a more personal nature, for our organization, I do want to acknowledge the passing of General William Lyon, who just days ago left us. I had the privilege and honor to serve in his organization and down the hall from him for almost 11 years. And so from a personal standpoint, he will be missed. He was a mentor to many. He was an icon in our industry. He was an influencer on a local, statewide, and national level, and there aren't many people like him, nor will there be people like him in the future to any great degree. So again, acknowledge his passing. He will be missed. So with that, Jeff, I will turn it back over to you and the panel, and look forward to the information that will be imparted on the rest of the membership. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, indeed, this is, we all know this is a difficult and somber times for our country, our state, our community, as we change and adapt in the world that we live in today. And as an industry, I think, we always understand, how important people are. We always put people first. We're in the people business, as Tom says. We build communities for everyone. So, when people are harmed by the virus or a bad economy, or when they are hurt or killed because of their race, it's intolerable, and it's unthinkable as well that as crime continues to rear itself, plaguing our communities that we have spent lifetimes and generations building and creating, it's also horrific. But regardless of all those things, BIA is one large family business, and no family business is that simple. And if any industry can push through these things, it's the BIAs of California. And the fact that we build in California, we shouldn't be scared of anything. And so today, as we move forward, we have assembled a really great team here. We are moving forward at an aggressive pace because government is being aggressive. They're being aggressive in every which way, trying to help, but a lot of their ideas are kind of out there. And so we have to be equally as fast and aggressive. And that's kind of what we're doing to make sure that we can have attainable housing for everybody here in California. So for better or for worse, government's not going away, neither is the BIA. We have serious jobs to do. And kudos to the chapters, the collaborative effort that is going on, to Dan Dunmoyer in Sacramento, the people that you have here on the call today. We're going to walk you through some examples of what we're doing differently, and trying to have an impact to protect our businesses and grow our businesses. And so with that, I want to turn it over to Dan Dunmoyer, who is head of the CBIA up in Sacramento and running our state. And it's his job to make sure that this legislature builds that 3.5 million homes. I'll take the 0.5 for right now, Dan, if that's okay. But this legislature, who have become recent experts on housing, are moving aggressively forward on many fronts, not just in housing, but you're seeing on the business side as well, a lot of interesting things going on in Sacramento under the COVID-19 and other things going on in this world. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Dan Dunmoyer, who's our first speaker.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you for the opportunity to brief you and your leadership team as well, and as the entire board. And I do consider it a great privilege to work with you and all of the regional leaders that are assembled here. Also, special shout out to Tom Grable, who wears multiple hats, including vice chairing our PAC and engaging on our executive committee. So appreciate the partnership. Let me walk you through a few things that are happening on the state level, and just going to give you a landscape review. You should recall, so much has changed, as Jeff mentioned, on the COVID-19 front. The governor's State of the State, which was towards the end of January, he spent his entire State of the State address on homelessness, and then concluded with 2 pages on housing and the steps he was going to take to, again, reach his and achieve his robust agenda goal of 3.5 million units. Governor no longer mentions that. Even in January, he just mentioned wanting to build a lot more units. And then, of course, you all know that COVID-19 changed the world. From a housing perspective, though, I'll just kind of walk you through some of our action steps and where we are and how they continue in the COVID world. So we work very diligently, working closely with regional leadership on different county levels, but also on a statewide level. CBA took the lead in making sure that housing would remain as an essential business. And we are going to continue to make that a priority. It should be intuitive, but not knowing what will happen with COVID, if there'll be additional spikes or not, once we move into these new levels that you hear from the governor. Right now, we're effectively in most counties in level 2 on COVID reentry. And if there are spikes, we want to make sure that housing stays essential. So we're keeping our priority focus on COVID-19, making sure housing stays essential. For those of you who build both north and south, the Bay Area shut down housing except for affordable on-site, 10%, for about almost 2 months. And so work very closely to keep that open. But Jeff and also Bora provided a lot of leadership, making sure that this did not translate down to Southern California. So housing continues to be essential throughout the state and throughout the COVID-19 activities. One thing that we are focusing on there, working with Cal OSHA to make sure that the new standards that are in place for workplace safety are basically achievable, and they are. Fortunately, OSHA has not taken a more aggressive step than what we have on federal OSHA. So we are in a place through our PPP requirements and other activities to maintain a safe work site. In addition to the kind of the COVID-19 issues, the other half of this that we've been working on is the reentry and opening up of the economy in general. Many of you know this because of what's happening with your sales. Although sales are still moving forward, they slowed down in many cases. And we want to make sure that the state does, in fact, give us a chance to come out of this pandemic, this economic pandemic. And what that means for us in practical terms is looking at economic stimulus efforts. So we're looking at that on the state and federal level. We're working with the LBA and also NHB to make sure that some of these stimulus package ideas are in place. And even though there's an effort to grant forbearance for mortgage holders, there is a ramification of that for us on the home sales side. If lenders get over forborne, if that's even a word, if more people are given free mortgages, there's less likelihood they'll give out legitimate mortgages to new home buyers. So working closely with LBA on this issue, as well as NHB, to make sure we are, in fact, the feds are acquiring some of the paper. They are making sure that, as we can go back into the sales factor side of things, that you don't have to have an 850 credit score and 30 years of clean credit and a 50% down payment to buy a house, because that's going to limit the ability to sell homes. So we are spending a lot of our time working with Secretary Carson, FHA, and others to make sure that we have a strong position. Let me shift to the state-specific activities. As Jeff mentioned, the legislature has become an expert in housing, even though some of their ideas are rather troubling. In particular, the good news is part of COVID-19's impact on legislation is that a number of measures that were truly problematic have just been put on the side. And the direction from both the speaker and the pro tem was that all legislation should in fact be either COVID related, related to homelessness, or related to fire safety. The definition of COVID related is pretty broad. So there are still a number of measures that we are watching that are really negative to housing. And so, we have our housing killer and housing creator list, which is a real quick way for a legislator to know, hey, this is a bill that's going to make it harder and more expensive to build, thus the term housing killer. And then also signal those measures that are housing creators. And a number of the housing killers have moved to the wayside, but there are still a few of those measures that we're watching very closely. In that space, on the housing killer side, there are a couple of bills that we believe are on hold. One that would reopen one of the key measures of 2017, which expanded the requirement that if in fact a subcontractor did not pay for work that you had provided as a builder or contractor, that on the hook would be the builder yet again to repay. This bill by Senator Durazo would then add punitive damages on top of the obligation to dual repay. So we are in fact, that measure appears to be on hold, but we're watching this stuff closely just because the legislature is acting very uniquely in this COVID world. And so that's a measure that we're watching closely. Another measure would have opened up prevailing wage for all residential. It was a BONTA bill. Again, this has now been put on hold, so we're hopeful that it stays on hold. And finally, there's just a lot of legislation that's out there in regards to free rents and free mortgage. And so we're watching those very closely as well, and working with our business partners. On the positive side, one of the measures that we hope to see introduced on Monday, if not today, is Senate Bill 281, which is a 2-year extension of all permits, all maps, and all approval processes, so that anything that's been delayed by local government can continue without you having to resubmit. So Senator Wiener has agreed to carry that measure for us. And that measure, again, should be put across the desk and should be in formal print by Monday. That's our hope. There's also some other legislation working on with Senator Caballero, which would make it easier to move from a retail space to residential. She's got a measure that would expedite that. One of our key measures too is by Assemblymember Rivas, which would allow for quick approval and review for building up to 10 units and create a process there, but labor killed that yesterday. Somewhat surprisingly, both a Rivas bill and an Eggman bill that we were supporting, labor just came out and decided to kill. And let me kind of wrap up my discussion in that space. Where are we at with labor? Many of you have known that this is an issue that's popped up. Labor is overplaying its hand. I'll just be really direct on this. There are pieces of legislation that don't touch them at all. They are basically opposing progressive Democrats' legislation just because they can, without a lot of communication, without a lot of, they'll just show up to a hearing and decide to defeat a measure just to show they can. The good news for us is it's making us look like we're wearing the brighter colored hats and the lighter colored hats. The bad news is they are just killing some really good legislation. So our plan is to continue to work with the governor through the budget process, which we're in the middle of, to see if some of these can be reinserted. Right now, we are not negotiating with labor any sort of comprehensive or even minimal deals because so far they have not presented anything worthy of that support. And with that conclusion on the legislative side, though, we do expect labor to continue to rumble and push for different agenda items. They have not done anything publicly there yet, but we plan to see and watch to see that. I'll wrap up my overall discussion with just a quick focus on the regulatory front. I won't go too deep on this because Jennifer's going to go deeper, but there are, unfortunately, as we're dealing with COVID, we kind of have an internal joke that COVID obviously is something that has an impact on all aspects of life except for one, and that's regulatory expansion. And so in Sacramento, regulations continue to expand, and the government right now continues, even though we're pushing for delay in all these fronts, to promote a very aggressive regulatory agenda. One of these areas is vehicle miles traveled, and this is a regulation that adds additional cost and complexity in all aspects of building. It's supposed to make it easier in these green spaces, as they're calling them, but it's not even doing that. Of course, anything that's traditional suburban building would add substantial cost. We're asking for delay there, along with a broad coalition of legislators and BIA leadership, thanks to Jeff. We also have waters of the state that went into effect last week, May 28th, and this expands additional water regulation. Unfortunately, they have not put additional staff to handle that, so we're pushing for that as well. We've asked for delay on stormwater general permit, which we have received, but we don't know when that's going to pop back up. Caltrans is coming up with a new vehicle miles traveled regulation on top of OPR's vehicle mile travel regulation. We've asked the governor's office to withdraw that completely. They're considering that. The last one I'll mention is vapor intrusion. For those of you up north, see that more than down south, but it could travel, and this is a regulation by the Department of Toxics that would require a super high level of quality cleanliness for your dirt. You know, what that means in English is $10,000 to $20,000 cost per building site if, in fact, it's deemed that it might emit some sort of vaporization. So as you're trying to come out of COVID, we're seeing more and more people on the regulatory side continue to move forward with regulations. So we have aggressively pursued delay strategies and all these issues with the governor's office. They're under consideration. Conversations as late as 8 p.m. last night said they're under consideration. But as you know, some of these are still moving forward. So let me stop there. I'll defer back to Jeff and the chairman if there's any questions you want me to address. But I just wanted to kind of get a sense of, just give you a sense of where we are on the state level, and glad to respond to questions when it's appropriate to take them. Thanks, Jeff. I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Dan. And if you have questions, please, you can send them in on the Q&A on your sheet there, and send them in, and we'll try to get all the Q&A answered towards the end of the discussion. So appreciate it, Dan. Thank you for all the work you're doing up in Sacramento, and we know it's not easy.
Thank you.
So next up, we have Jennifer Hernandez. And for those who don't know, Jennifer does lots of things, but in her spare time, she is an attorney. And she works for BUILD, our Building Industry Legal Defense, but I like to refer to them more like JAWS. If you get a letter from BUILD, there's a dorsal fin probably circling around, nibbling on you, may even take out a leg and whatnot. So our Juris Doctorate attorney who likes to sever things is my new terminology for you, Jennifer. She's been a breath of fresh air, aggressive fresh air in the climate that we're in. Her and Adam Wood are running BUILD, and I see some of our BUILD members that are on here as well today. They are been working in overtime. Speed is everything, just like a shark. You got to be fast, you got to be quick. And so they have been doing around the clock work for our chapters and for our industry. And as it pertains to SCAG and VMT, there's just a lot going on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jennifer.
Well, thanks very much, Jeff. And it's great to join you, and it's a real privilege to be working with you all and with BUILD. I'm going to focus just on two topics. I'll finish up the conversation that Dan started on VMT, vehicle miles traveled, and report in on that, and then move on to the SCAG Sustainable Communities Strategy, which is a 4-year regional plan for housing, population, and transportation projects that's updated every 4 years, and this is our third round, which Rich Lambros and Andy Henderson and I have had the privilege of working on each round together on. So vehicle miles traveled, the concept, or as it's called sometimes the ideology, is to really focus new housing in higher density elevator buildings near transit, with the hope that folks who live in those buildings will take transit more and drive less. That's what's called the VMT ideology. And there was a very nice letter signed by, I think, about 18 now legislators, a number of leaders on the housing space, including Senator Caballero from Salinas, also bipartisan letter, which urgently requested the governor to postpone implementation and enforcement of this VMT regime through CEQA, which is slated to start on July 1st. The notion of regulating VMT really came out of a bill introduced on the same day it was passed, no longer a lawful practice, by Darrell Steinberg to get the King's Arena built on time so the NBA wouldn't go to Seattle. And that bill had a lot to do about the King's Arena. And at the very end, it had a provision to encourage development of transit-oriented neighborhood housing. And the goal there was to take away from CEQA the requirement that you fix traffic congestion in transit neighborhoods, because the whole point of these transit neighborhoods was to give cities the flexibility without having to fix traffic congestion to build walkable transit-oriented communities. And that's what the bill really was designed to do. That's what it does. And in these transit priority neighborhoods, as they're called, which our colleagues from SCAG who do terrific analytical work have estimated is about 3% of the SCAG region is a transit priority area. This legislation authorized CEQA to ignore traffic congestion in those areas. The Office of Administrative Law, seeking to advance climate objectives, said that they weren't going to confine this to just transit priority areas. They wanted to reduce VMT statewide. And what that form of reduction is first circular. If you're in a location where you can't take the bus or a train, you should relocate your housing to a neighborhood that does have those transit services, which is a little inconsistent, shall we say, with RENA and other housing production laws. And if you can't relocate your project and your housing, then you have to reduce vehicle miles traveled. How do you reduce vehicle miles traveled? You take miles traveled by someone off the road. There's no definition about where the off-road reductions are. There's scant evidence that there's any mitigation available to really achieve those goals. Nothing that you can do in building an apartment across the street from an existing apartment is going to change the transportation options available to those residents. So not surprisingly, the recommendation for mitigation is a fee to help support transit or help support bike paths or help support other stuff. It's not a negotiated fee though, like inclusionary or art. It's a CEQA fee, which means that it has to be enough to actually reduce vehicle miles traveled, and it has to be effective. No one knows, especially in COVID, how to make that happen. Public transit ridership was falling dramatically actually over the years pre-COVID. It's fallen off the charts now, and CDC, Center for Disease Control, is recommending employers help subsidize the cost of parking and other tools to make it more possible for people to avoid mass transit. So COVID presents unique opportunities and constraints on transportation, which we don't know yet how are going to come out. We're all doing this remotely. That would have been unthinkable 3 miles away. 3 months before now. Turns out not going to work at all is a really effective VMT reduction strategy. A lot more effective than living in an elevator building next to a bus stop. In any event, this VMT regime is slated to take effect. I also have the privilege of representing a civil rights group, which is an incredible group of civil rights warriors fighting for home ownership as a critical step, and in many ways the only step available to working families to help actually get economic security and create wealth for future generations. That group is called the 200. We have a lawsuit pending in San Bernardino Superior Court to halt the implementation of this VMT regime. Tuesday of this week, we filed a motion for a preliminary injunction to require the halt of the VMT regime, except in these transit neighborhoods, these 3% of Southern California's land that are designed to be transit neighborhoods. And if enforcing this regime there is fine. Enforcing it anywhere outside of there imposes fees, and depending on how you want to calculate fees and what you're trying to do to mitigate GHG reductions, buying bus passes is what we looked at as the example. LA Metro bus passes bought at the front end, as are all mitigation requirements under CEQA, would add a little over $40,000 per housing unit to the cost of a home in San Bernardino. And that's assuming we just needed to get 15% below BMT averages. If we have to go all the way down to completely offsetting VMT, then it's more than $400,000 per unit. So very serious, very, very directly threatening to homes. And even with those kind of fees, there's no evidence that we would actually reduce VMT. I'll leave VMT to the side now and just briefly recap, because Rich and Andy Henderson will also talk about this. So this every 4-year adventure we have with our colleagues at SCAG to understand what the pattern of future development should be to achieve greenhouse gas reduction targets handed down by the California Air Resources Board. And the California Air Resources Board has made clear that the only GHG reductions that it wants to recognize are from vehicle miles traveled reductions. Again, vehicle miles traveled continue to increase with economic activity and population, although who knows post-COVID whether work from home will be even more popular than it is or was before COVID. We received the draft SCAG plan, the 2020 plan, in November. BUILD joined with several other business groups in raising very serious concerns about the plan, which does concentrate development, housing development around transit to the exclusion of local input, which is the information that local agencies provided SCAG about how they would grow given their general plans and given their own forecasts. We had very serious concerns about the draft plan. SCAG then issued its final plan at the end of March, right as we were all doing, COVID emergency activities. Was end of March or end of February? I have lost track. But in any event, the draft came out. It was about 10,000, or the final came out. It was about 10,000 pages in the middle of the pandemic, literally as we were all adjusting. And we begged really for additional time to consider this. And we reached an accommodation, which was unanimously supported by the Regional Council of SCAG through really hard work by this group to postpone approval of the SCS until we all had more time to work through the content, which we have not had time to do. The Regional Transportation Plan, which is the list of transportation projects, was approved before June 1st, which was a major goal of SCAG. And so it was a classic example of what we've always been able to do with SCAG, which is to work through a win-win compromise approach. We're now in the middle of a 120-day extension period for the SCS, that land use component of this exercise. And SCAG has been terrific in providing a ton of data and really being transparent about what its vision for the region's future growth looks like. And without getting too wonky, that vision is embodied in a whole bunch, thousands of little maps called traffic analysis zone maps. And you can have, 20 TAZs in a little city like, not so little, but Claremont and 2,000 in Los Angeles. So it really varies a lot. But these little maps then are aggregated up to show where in the SCAG plan housing should go and jobs should go. And that's what we're in the process of reviewing now. The SCS, I'll just close, is really important for two reasons. One, there are some CEQA exemptions that are available or streamlining available only if you're consistent with the SCS. And that consistency determination under state law at least happens at the property level. And second, if you're not trying to use any of the CEQA streamlining and have to actually go through CEQA, if you're inconsistent with the SCS, there's a at least rebuttable presumption that your project then has greenhouse gas emissions in excess of regional targets that need to be mitigated. Mitigation for greenhouse gases, again, generally fee-based for the housing industry. So that's why it matters. Housing continues to be the top target of CEQA lawsuits statewide. Every single one of the housing production bills introduced in Sacramento this year has a CEQA component, even though they rarely say CEQA. And that's why we're focused on this issue. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Rich and Andy.
Jeff, you want me to just jump in? I'm happy to do so.
Just Rich Lambros, Andy Henderson have been the focal point and running point as it relates to SCAG, and represent the delegation, the business delegation. Rich, former CEO of BIASC Southern California, so he has some knowledge of this. He's been through this many times. And thank you, Rich, for joining us. So I'll turn over to you.
Thanks, Jeff, and thank you all for joining this afternoon. I appreciate Jennifer's outline. I'm just going to add a little to it, but first take one step back because Jeff framed it up well. You know, we're in a dynamic time, and the work we all do, everyone you're looking at here on your screen in government affairs, sometimes our business is a little bit like trench warfare. Everyone's dug in, and issues don't move a whole lot year in and year out. We fight, and you know, that line on an issue may move a little bit, but we don't see rapid change a lot of times on issues. And then things come along and our world becomes much more dynamic. And that's, of course, where we are right now, and you all know that. And that, you know, that dynamic change began with COVID, which disrupted everything, and then rapidly turned to an economic recovery dynamic of where we were considering economic stimulus that we had never thought about or talked about or maybe thought possible before. And then in just the last 2 weeks, we've seen a social justice issue that's further changed our dynamic and changed the debate. And, you know, in all of that, our job is to try to stay focused on an issue that I know everyone on this call and everyone watching believes in, which is housing. And certainly I think all of us can make an argument that in each one of those dynamics that have caused change, housing still remains fundamental to certainly, you know, when you're in shelter and home, nothing more important than a home to do that, and all the way through to economic stimulus, an important role housing plays in the economy, and that's certainly in our social issue right now. You know, home ownership is part of that American dream that we have to make sure is shared broadly. So in all respects, what we still feel the work we're doing remains important for this industry, but it shifts. And so we've tried to rapidly digest what's happening and make changes. And I use that as a backdrop for what Jennifer just covered, because whether you're talking about VMT, a vehicle miles traveled approach, and Jennifer said it right on, VMT is really an ideology. It's not just a policy, it's an ideology about how growth and development, how we'll live in California for decades to come. And they wanted to start that shift through changes in CEQA, and they did that. And we weighed in those debates over the last 3 to 5 years. And then the RTP-SCS, which is a 25-year vision for our region, and RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, Sustainable Community Strategy, those two things together set out what Southern California will look like for 25 years. And all of those, that VMT plan and that RTP-SCS were developed before the beginning of March, before the pandemic. And so I think what plays into everything we're doing on both these issues is how much the world has changed and how much, to some degree, those plans no longer are as relevant or certainly warrant some rethinking. On the SCAG side, as Jennifer pointed out, we'll spare all the details she outlined them. We were able to work with SCAG leaders, and I think SCAG gets the idea that the planning work they did remains for the most part valid, but there are dynamic changes occurring now, so we need to get a pause. And so we were able to come up with this idea of passing the RTP, and that's important because that keeps funding going. That's, by the way, the RTP component of this plan accounts for $630 billion over 25 years in infrastructure. So that's important. It's important that that gets adopted, the federal dollars continue to flow, roads, transit, infrastructure that we need for building continues to happen. So we were fine with let's move that now. But on the sustainable community strategy side, our land use vision for the future, a lot changing rapidly. And not only do we need a pause, but quite frankly, we needed the time to dig in and look at the plan. And that's where Jennifer was starting to take you. We'll spare you that. But the detail of these plans really does matter. And just as one example that many of you may have heard about, but it's worth repeating here, you know, the Tejon Ranch project, the Centennial project there at Tejon, one that a number of folks on this call may have personally shown up and testified for at LA County last year. And it's been a 12-year venture to get it through entitlement. Got entitled just last year. And then we found out that in the process of completing the plan, SCAG had left out 3,000 homes and 22,000 jobs in that plan. Now, That's important. That's obviously a big impact, can significantly change the dynamics of that plan, could also create very quick fodder for a CEQA suit on a project that's already undergone multiple lawsuits. So we knew when we started to uncover those issues, we needed more time. SCAG and SCAG leadership agreed, and that's the process we're in now. So what I really just wanted to do is give you that background and then tell you that step one then, and what we're working on today as we speak, is trying to restore all entitlements within the RTP-SCS to make sure that there is no hard-fought work that you all did to entitle the project, and now we're going to see anything less than that full entitlement in the final SCS. So that's job one, and SCAG is working with us on that. And job two, as Jennifer got into a bit, is just this idea that the plan itself may have inconsistencies with local general plans. And until you really roll up your sleeves, look at those thousands of TAS maps, understand where movement has occurred, it's hard to know whether that favors housing or disadvantages housing, or frankly other infrastructure development and the economy. So that's the work we're doing now. SCAG's been providing a lot of the data. Our team, Jennifer and Andy, do terrific work as well. And so we've been getting a picture of this we've not had before. Adam Wood is also involved, and we're breaking it down. And there'll be some more dialogue on that, I know, with the membership about TAS, and inviting you all to take a look at how some of these maps might be impacting some of your projects. But it's moving rapidly. We've got a 120-day delay, but frankly, it's even shorter than that when you start thinking about how quickly we have to uncover the issues and start addressing the issues so that we can have it all done in 120 days. So that's the work we're engaged in right now, and it really can make a big difference for housing. What particularly is important, and Jennifer got to this at the tail end of her talk, it's particularly important because the increased role this plan plays in determining whether or not you have consistency for GHG or for VMT on your projects. And so we want to get it as right as we can on the front end so you don't have any issues on the tail end or any CEQA entanglement that you shouldn't have. So that's the work that's going on. I'll be happy to answer questions there. On the second part of the equation, Jeff mentioned, I have the great pleasure of working with you all at BIA. I also have the pleasure of helping to lead another work I do, pretty broad-based regional coalition. So BIA is now working actively with all the other top business groups in Southern California. Some of you saw the letters we did on this VMT or on the SCS issue. It included every major chamber in our region and most major business groups. And that's a lot of the coordinating work that I continue to do and enjoy doing for BIA, as well as the broader business community. We're getting that same coalition rapidly engaged on VMT. In fact, honestly, some of the members of that coalition have been weighing in on this issue for a long time, but now thanks to BIA's big push and generating the effort to really ask for this 1-year delay on VMT's implementation locally, we're seeing more and more business groups join in. So we'll be continuing to do that and hope to see a really continued groundswell of support and an ask that grows stronger that California delay this idea at this time, both because it needs to be rethought and also because right now, in a time of economic recovery, this is an incredibly challenging new policy to try to implement. It'll certainly have a delay in economic stimulus, and that's not what we want to do right now. We want to expedite economic activity, not slow it down. So that's my report, Jeff, just adding a few dimensions to what Jennifer said, and be happy to turn over to you and to Andy.
Yep. Andy, you're up next. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you who don't know me, I was the general counsel of the BIA from 2005 to 2013. And it was in 2007 that this SB 375 legislation first was brought to the legislature, resulting in all this sustainable community strategy and regional transportation planning. And when the bill first was introduced in 2007, it actually required regional transportation plans like the one that SCAG is working on, or the one that SCAG just adopted, to result in the reduction in per capita vehicle miles traveled by 10% in the larger regions. So if you had a county with a population of more than 500,000, you were supposed to aim for a 10% reduction in per capita driving. The BIA and CBIA was successful in getting that knocked out very early in the legislation, and the legislation morphed instead into one that looks to have regulators at the state level established targets for greenhouse gas reductions that would result from the way we plan our transportation and our employment growth and household growth, i.e. land use. So that's what came out in 2008 in Senate Bill 375. And since 2012 and every 4 years, we've been working with SCAG to accomplish this this kind of planning. And we've followed it very closely in 2012 and 2016. We effected some changes, but we were very concerned about it this time. And just to give you a little background, we did discover that there were disparities between entitlements and the land use plan that came out in late March. We understand that SCAG staff is working to fix those. They say they've identified 10 entitled projects in 6 jurisdictions, and that they are working with the local jurisdictions to try to resolve those differences as they can. So we believe that element has been taken care of. Another element that is reflected in the postponement that we got for 120 days on the sustainable community strategy is to look at COVID-19 impacts, the pandemic impacts, but we believe that SCAG staff is really not anticipating reflecting any sort of conclusions drawn from that analysis in the final product that's going to be adopted in early September. That leaves then the third element of the reason for the postponement for 120 days, and that was to look at, to compare SCAG's vision of future growth to local general plans, and as it turns out, more closely to the local input that was given to SCAG. And what it's really come down to is that there were 2 alternatives, other than a no project alternative, which is a non-starter. There were 2 alternatives that were studied in connection with this SCS. One is the local input, where everyone had sort of agreed on household growth and employment growth, numbers by jurisdiction. And then the local government said, well, here's where we think it's going to go. And then SCAG had an alternative view, which is much more constrictive and locates household growth and employment growth much more around transit and at city centers, as opposed to around the periphery and in the unincorporated areas very close to existing development and transit. So those are the 2 competing proposals, and what we are doing now is taking care to look very closely at those differences. The differences are quite stark in some cases, where the SCAG plan of vision for the future is highly constrictive compared to the local input. And so we're just beginning to understand those differences and what they imply. There's a lot of confusion about the SCS because when the legislation was enacted, the government code section that applies says that local governments don't have to change their general plans to reflect the SCS. So if SCAG has a particular view of how things should grow, local government can theoretically ignore it and continue to have its own general plan and to amend its general plan as it sees fit. We're very concerned, though, that as the law has unfolded, that there's a lot of pressures in CEQA in particular, including a 2018 change in CEQA guidelines that gives some much more meaning to the SCS. And moreover, we've heard from the California Resources Board, who did a study of the first 2 series of SCSs and said that they weren't being realized. So they want state law to change to make the SCSs more, have a lot more teeth. And then finally, we know all the time that there is legislation being introduced by various legislators who want to give various benefits under CEQA and other benefits or priorities to projects that are consistent with the SCS. All of this then is sort of driving away from the ability of local governments to steer their own course. And we've always felt very strongly at the BIA that the ability for the local governments to steer their own course is the best way to go. It's best from a small d democracy standpoint. We believe it's a more realistic picture of land use growth is the one that was provided by the local input, as opposed to the ones that's developed by SCAG. And that's not to be dismissive of SCAG's effort. They have all sorts of working groups that try to come up with constraints and policies. that lead them to their conclusions of a different vision of how we should grow. And they work hard on what they do, but at the end of the day, we believe the local input has got to be respected, and we're just now getting our arms around those differences and what they may imply. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig Foster and look forward to any questions.
Hold on one second. We're gonna divert to Carlos first, and then Craig, because Carlos has to get on to some pressing business with the city. So with that, I'll introduce Carlos Rodriguez, our Baldy Chapter Executive Officer. For those of you that are involved in the Baldy Chapter, kudos to all of you. We're starting to see a lot of movement out in that area, and a lot of digital advocacy and a lot of things that Carlos is doing, a very aggressive approach. There's a lot going on. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carlos.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate the audible there. Just want to welcome everyone to the webinar today, and just want to recap some of the recent efforts for the Baldy Chapter Government Affairs. I think it's been an all hands on deck effort related to the SCAG 120-day delay. Want to just take a moment to thank outgoing President Bill Yon of Big Bear Lake, who handed the baton over its SCAG president yesterday at the General Assembly. And we want to congratulate him for an outstanding year as president. And we always appreciate working with Bill over the years. He's, for those of you who don't know, a past president of the BI Baldy Chapter, and he was inducted into our Hall of Fame actually back in 1993. Also want to congratulate Rex Richardson of Long Beach for taking the helm as SCAG president, and also Clint Lorimore of Eastvale as the first vice president. Really wanted to dive into that effort. Was successful, of course, as mentioned, and we spent time outreaching to the regional council members in San Bernardino County, and want to thank them for their support as part of the unanimous vote that was secured to allow us to have the time to get into the TAS maps and the other important issues. So really was an all hands on deck, and really was a high priority for the Baldy Chapter to reach out to all the regional council members in our service area. So we appreciate that collaboration. As far as the VMT effort, that's also been the top priority for us lately, as we have been engaging with various cities in our service area to really unpack the details of their proposed plans that need to be implemented by July 1st, absent a move by the governor to extend the deadline to July 1st of 2021. So want to thank Sandy Pan Bhattacharjee of Translutions, one of our board members, and Andy Henderson for joining me on a series of briefings with not only the County of San Bernardino, but cities like Adelanto, Chino Hills, Fontana, Hesperia, Ontario, Pomona, Rancho Cucamonga, Redlands, Upland, Victorville, Yucaipa. Those strategic discussions really have centered on ensuring we have the lightest touch with focus on the VMT thresholds that are adopted by the cities at the highest defensible level on the VMT thresholds for their respective cities. Also, we have been in discussions with cities about what are the exemption levels, what are the thresholds for exemptions for projects. OPR has recommended a total daily trips threshold of 110 as the bar to exempt approximately projects about 11 units from the VMT requirement. We believe in our technical analysis that there are arguments for higher thresholds that are defensible, much higher than that. And we're pleased to share that there's at least 2 jurisdictions in the works that are poised to increase that exemption level from roughly 11 units to upwards to over 100 units. So that's substantial opportunity to have projects that would otherwise have to go through this new requirement that would be exempt. So we're looking forward to the opportunity to discuss this methodology with other cities and remain very assertive in that effort. Shifting gears, as we hope that the governor will take the prudent action to extend the VMT implementation by a year, I want to take a moment to thank the County Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino County and Chairman Hagman and his colleagues for being the first county in our service area to reach out to the governor formally. They have sent a letter this week, and I'll just take a moment to read some excerpts from this letter. So if any cities are listening out there, you can just follow the lead of this letter here. On behalf of the County of San Bernardino, we respectfully request a one-year extension to the implementation of the vehicle miles traveled as part of SB 743. As you are aware, SB 743 changes the way transportation impacts are identified under CEQA. In December 2018, the California Natural Resources Agency completed the rulemaking process to modify the CEQA guidelines for the implementation of SB 743, which includes applying VMT statewide. The incorporation of VMT is in addition to existing laws which require the quantification and mitigation of air quality impacts. I'll forego reading the rest, but I'll get to my favorite part here. For the above reasons, the County of San Bernardino respectfully requests a one-year extension of the VMT implementation that was part of Senate Bill 743. We believe that other jurisdictions throughout San Bernardino County will be taking similar actions. We're hopeful that in a very near future, SCAG will be amongst those government agencies that will also be sending a letter. So thanks in advance to them for moving that out in a timely manner. But we also anticipate the cities of Highland, Atlanto, Apple Valley, Barstow, Big Bear, Chino Hills, Fontana, Montclair, Ontario, Victorville, Upland, and Hesperia also to be moving to send similar correspondences. Shifting from the VMT effort, I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about some of our regulatory efforts. And I'm pleased to announce that the County of San Bernardino on the Title 24 requirements, the deadline for July has been moved to October, which has allowed a number of projects to forego that previous deadline of the new Title 24 and work under the existing, the previous, I should say, Title 24 regulations in the county. So that certainly provided upwards to, I believe there's around $5,000 per unit for projects that otherwise would have to be building to the new Title 24 code. So we're thankful to the County of San Bernardino for that extension. We're also on the regulatory front coordinating with a CBIA as well as the County of San Bernardino and members of the state legislature, most notably Assemblyman Obernolte and Mays on the effort to by the California Fish and Game Commission to consider listing the Joshua tree as a threatened species under the California Endangered Species Act. On June 24th, California Fish and Game will be considering this. We agree with the county as to opposing this overreach, and we are concerned that this move unnecessarily would threaten development not only in the Morongo Basin High Desert, but also in LA County areas such as Palmdale and Lancaster. So we look forward to continuing our coordination with the county, CBIA, our Building Industry Legal Defense Foundation on identifying opportunities for political and legal strategies on that front. Moving quickly to fees, in about 15 minutes, I'll be on a call with the Fontana Unified School District regarding their postponement of a previously anticipated adoption or proposed adoption of a fee increase from $4 a square foot to over $10 a square foot. We believe we have very strong arguments to oppose that and look forward to talking with them in about 15 minutes. Upland Unified School District also has a correspondence from us proposing the elimination of their level 1 school fee, and we're waiting for a response from them on that front. I'm also pleased to announce that the Inland Empire Utilities Agency, which provides water and wastewater connections, both of their connection fees are going to be considered a 1-year delay of a proposed increase per the request of the BIA, which would impact connection fees in Ontario, Rancho Cucamonga, Montclair, Upland, and Fontana. So we're grateful for the consideration of staff and their recommendation, and we're looking forward to IUA's board considering that. Lastly, I'll go into some code amendment efforts. We're pleased that the city of Victorville and working with our Victorville Task Force is poised to recommend a reduction in minimum home sizes from 1,600 square foot homes to 1,400 square foot homes as a minimum size. So we're also looking forward to having future discussions with them about minimum lot sizes reform. On the not so positive note, the city of Hesperia, unfortunately, is considering a ballot box zoning initiative to increase the minimum lot size to 1/3 of an acre, which would undermine their RHNA obligations, and we look forward to engaging them in what I anticipate will be a lively discussion, to say the least. Also, we're in discussion with the city of Fontana about further reform on 360-degree architectural design standards, and we've had a lot of collaborations with them and looking forward to that discussion continuing, as well as the city of Adelanto and discussing also reductions in minimum lot sizes in their development code. We do appreciate the history of collaboration with the city of Rancho Cucamonga, and we are monitoring an area of concern regarding a potential inclusionary zoning proposal. So we'll look forward to continuing our discussions there. On the election front, one area of concern that we have is a ballot measure proposed for November, and if passed, would reduce the compensation for each member of the Board of Supervisors to $5,000 a month, and also one term for a county supervisor. The concern is that essentially you would move to a part-time Board of Supervisors and would undermine the continuity of leadership that we enjoy today. So that'll be something that we'll be taking up with our Political Action Committee trustees in the near future. And with that, I'll end there. And again, thank you for the time, Jeff, and looking forward to continuing the advocacy efforts for the Baldy chapter and BIA. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlos. And thank you, Baldy chapter. They've been very instrumental with SCAG, as there's a lot of elected official leaders are located in San Bernardino County, and Carlos and that board has been very instrumental with the negotiations, the official negotiations and the unofficial negotiations, and that continues moving forward. It's very critical for our success. I'd also note, with all the buildings being shut down, including Sacramento and our city council offices, our digital advocacy is critical. It's something that we started. We started with moving to keep our government agencies open when the pandemic hit. And SCAG was the first to see that demonstration with 15,000 emails to elected officials over a few weeks period. And that's kudos to everybody on this call and to all of our members. And so if you've received an email from BIA, if you've already registered, it's one click. If you haven't, it's 2 clicks. It's critically important at this time where, again, digital advocacy is everything right now. And for us, it is a really good reason why we have gotten where we're at in terms of delays and getting our voices heard, so to speak, while you're sitting at home. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Craig Foster, our Chief Operating Officer. I want to, before we get into the chapters more, I want to talk about a little bit about, there's a lot of things that we're doing on as an organization. We've had some changes. There's a lot of things where we need your help, and it's not all about advocacy. Even though that is our priority, there's lots of other things that we are doing, and we want to just share that with you now. So Craig, you're next.
All right, thanks, Jeff. This, you might say, will be the first and only commercial break of the day for the panelists and our participants. But as Jeff mentioned, I think it's important for our members online, as well as other guests that are here, to understand some of the background behind government affairs and advocacy, and what the BIA does as an organization to make sure our government affairs and advocacy are at the forefront of what we do. Throughout the last 3 months, our association has, even in these difficult times, has maintained its core values of advocacy, keeping home building essential in the state, and that our members are our first priority. We've done a lot of project support over the last couple of years, but this year alone, the regional office and the chapters have assisted builders with many different project issues, such as HUD, FHA recertification issues in Irvine, segregation tax and supplemental tax bills in San Bernardino, working on project approvals in Upland, and as Carlos mentioned, delaying building code enforcement in San Bernardino, which will save one builder over $350,000. Those are wins, and we continue to look for those, and we encourage our members to reach out to us because that's what we want to do, is to help you resolve issues. With respects to the utilities, so far this year, we've conducted utility updates with Southern California Edison and SoCal Gas. And we met as far as members getting and setting expectations for those utilities during this pandemic, and basically ensuring that our builder projects keep moving forward. Later this month, we will be having a special Zoom meeting with our home builders and the CEO of Southern California Edison. And that call will be to discuss 2020 and beyond. As far as our membership, membership is holding steady through these hard times. The BIA of Southern California is still one of the top 3 associations in the nation. It is still the #1 association in California, representing almost 40% of all CBIA memberships. Our councils are strong and contributing. Regarding member services, to date, the regional sign program is maintaining its market share even through these serious times. We established an online marketing tool for builders called New Home Showcase, which is driving traffic to their websites and increasing their online sales. We're about to roll out the BIASC Academy of Home Building Education this month. The first offerings will be a level 1 construction manager, level 2 trades safety and best practice course online, and after successful completion, the project site will receive certification as to having completed these courses. With regards to digital advocacy, a lot of you are aware of just what the BIA has done in the last 3 months. Since February, Chuck Hahn, Jeff, and myself selected the platform we're currently using. It's gone from 0 to over 10,000 resources in our database, and has basically put the whole state on notice that the BIASC will campaign on every level for the political arena to ensure our builders are heard and are protected. Lastly, events and networking, which is a key to our association. At the inception of the shelter in place, Zoom and webinars came to the forefront of communication and was still useful, but there's a little bit of hangover occurring. The BIA is intent on getting our members out of their shelter in place. We are in the process of scheduling several golf tournaments to occur over the next 2-3 months, skeet shooting event in Los Angeles as well. And we plan on having our building industry show in October, and be on the lookout for that. Lastly, we'll also be launching our digital magazine, the BIA magazine, and more updates on advocacy and the other components that I just mentioned will be in that. Thank you. Jeff?
Thank you, Craig. Thank you for all that information. All right, so now we're going to move into more of our chapter updates. Next up is Mr. Lou Monville, who's taking care of our Riverside chapter for us. And congratulations to Lou as Riverside County tries to reboot their economy. The Board of Supervisors put together their task force, and Lou has been is now the chair of that task force. So there's a lot going on in Riverside County, and Riverside County is a huge priority for our organization. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Monville.
Well, thank you, Jeff, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. As Jeff said, lots happening in Riverside County. Obviously, so much about getting the economy rebooted and restarted in Riverside County in earnest. The BIA has been at the forefront leadership on, and we're pleased to serve in that capacity. And it's a tribute to the Riverside County Board of Supervisors that they see the importance of home building to the overall economy in Riverside County and have placed us in a leadership position to help lead the economic recovery on COVID. And so we're happy to play that role. A couple of brief updates. I won't try to be repetitive of other things you've heard. First and foremost, I know we have some local government partners on the phone, and I have to say, our local government partners almost universally throughout Riverside County have been terrific through this COVID pandemic. Whether it be working with our members on virtual plan checks, virtual building inspections, helping us with closings, and the whole host of myriad of challenges you face when building projects in a virtual environment. And our folks have really been cutting edge in constant contact with us and our builder members to get projects implemented and to keep projects moving forward. And we're grateful to those efforts. We have been focused in a number of areas recently, particularly in the VMT. Many cities have reached out to the BIA as a resource as they have struggled on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis to try and figure out how to make VMT work. In one particular case in the city of Riverside, it's a strange occasion when you have the city's traffic engineer saying, "Lou, I've run the numbers every way I can. I can't figure out how to help you all build homes without doing an EIR for more than 11 single-family units." It's a remarkable statement about the challenge that legislation has posed on our local cities who are desperately trying to meet their RENA numbers. So we have been successful in gaining support from a number of our jurisdictions seeking the VMT delay. I think as more of them get closer and closer to the deadline and realize the complications that this legislation poses for them, the more and more that are looking for that delay. To Dan Dunmoyer's earlier point, the other challenge for our regional transportation agency, RCTC, is they're now seeing a whole host of new implementation guidelines coming from Caltrans. And so next week on their agenda, RCTC is going to be asking the state for a 2-year delay implementation for them to have the time to get their hands around how to make that work for Riverside County. And much like the County Board of Supervisors in San Bernardino County, on the 16th of June, the Riverside County Board of Supervisors has taken a formal letter to their board asking for a 2-year delay. I would also like to mention, obviously, Senator Roth, who works very closely with our boards and the local transportation agencies, been very, very supportive of that delay, and we appreciate his leadership in that regard. We've also got some fee challenges in Riverside County. Riverside County is unique for many jurisdictions. As many of you know, it has a countywide MSHCP. That MSHCP has been critical for our local builder members and local jurisdictions as it relates to issues of incidental take and for building infrastructure. The MSHCP is due to in 2029.
No. Hello.
Oh, is set to sunset in 2029. They are behind in both the acquisition of property as well as assemblage of some of the assemblage requirements of the MSHCP. It's going to necessitate an extension of the MSHCP as well as a change in how fees are collected. For quite some time, the fee on the MSHCP has been very steady. It is going to be something that they're going to have to increase to achieve the goals. They have engaged the BIA in those discussions, and we appreciate their partnership, and we'll continue to work through the challenges to make sure that the MSHCP continues to live up to its goals and give the certainty that our members have invested in as it relates to take and the ability to build projects. Finally, on a couple of fronts, one, I want to thank the city of Menifee, who just did a comprehensive overhaul of their design guidelines. Menifee is the city that is most active in Riverside County for our builders. They worked with us extensively to come up with a set of guidelines that are less onerous, more market driven, and really put our builders in a position to deliver the kinds of quality product that buyers want. And I appreciate the partnership of the city of Menifee in that regard. We do have a few election items on the horizon and some special appointments coming up. You've probably all seen in the news, we're going to have a vacancy on the Temecula City Council that'll have to be addressed. Unfortunately, the BIA lost a real advocate and ally on the Western Municipal Water District and a board member by the name of Bob Stockton. Bob was a wonderful man, a local engineer at Rick Engineering, someone who I partnered with a lot, was tragically killed in a pedestrian auto accident several weeks ago. But they're going to begin the process to fill that seat on the Western Municipal Water District. And that will be a swing vote and a critical effort by our members to make sure we get a candidate who understands the importance of safe and adequate water supplies as it relates to the building industry. And so we're actively engaged in meetings and discussions there to work for a pro-builder appointee. And then finally, a citizens initiative, again, back to the city of Menifee, has qualified to repeal the city's 1 cent sales tax. Couldn't come at a worse time. Both the fiscal constraints on the city of Menifee are significant given the COVID impacts, and now peeling back a sales tax measure which covers most of their public safety costs. Fear with this would be, of course, if those fees go away, they'll be looking to the builder community and to others to try and fill that gap. We're partnering with many in the Menifee community to try and defend that sales tax and prevent that erosion of critical revenue to keep our builders moving and protected. And so with that, I want to thank everyone for joining the call. I'd be happy to take any questions and appreciate your ongoing support of the Riverside County chapter of the BIA.
Thank you, Lou. Appreciate it. And we'll take questions at the end. We're starting to get some questions already, so that's good. Next up is Diana Coronado. If Diana's there, you can there you are. Diana is in charge of our LA chapter, and LA is at the forefront of everything, as we know, and critically important to the BIA. And their chapter and under their leadership have done a lot, especially with BizFed. BizFed has become something that is an organization that's really aligned with us on a lot of issues. And Diana, I know you sit on that board, and we're just seeing the business community kind of gel together. And a lot of that's because of the relationships that our LA chapter has with the BizFed and with the other coalitions that exist in Los Angeles. As we move forward, dealing with Sacramento, it does become territorial. So Southern California needs to be protected, and we cannot protect Southern California without Los Angeles. So with that, Ms. Coronado, you're up.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks for everyone who's on the call today. I know we're giving you a lot of information, but hopefully it's valuable to you. Just kicking off really quickly on COVID, it's been a huge effort for us to make sure that all of our building continues to stay essential. We've worked very closely with the City of Los Angeles, which is in our territory, the County of Los Angeles, and the County of Ventura to ensure that things like virtual inspections and everything virtual mentioned by Lou continue to be processed, especially related to payments and other types of processes that kind of maybe had kinks in the beginning, but are now being ironed out pretty nicely for our builder and associate members. Additionally, as you'll hear in my report, I will speak on a few of the other stakeholder working groups we're working on. Quickly pivoting to VMT, you guys have heard a lot about VMT. It's obviously at the forefront of everything we're doing at every chapter, particularly in Los Angeles. It's a huge jurisdiction that we cover. It's just over or at 100 different cities and counties. 2 counties, the rest are cities. And we have a 30% response rate on what folks are doing with VMT. So that's low, but that's still a significant amount of cities. Like you've heard from many of the speakers before me, cities are confused. They don't have the resources. There's pending litigation, and there's a lot of uncertainty on what's happening with VMT right now. And they've told us they need this delay. And so we've been able to partner with many cities. We are not the same rate of the other chapters where they are already adopting resolutions and taking resolutions to their city council meetings, but we're getting there. We have about 5 cities across LA County who are looking to do that, and we do have meetings with our builder members in other cities next week, and we have a meeting with the County of Los Angeles next week. As was mentioned, and I think Mark Huffman has a question. I don't know if you want to take a look at it, Jennifer, but what are we going to do with a city like Los Angeles who's already adopted VMT? That's something that we're working on and trying to see what to do. There's obviously, this effort is bigger than just BIA while we are leading it, and we've gotten a lot of recognition for leading it. Like Jeff mentioned, BizFed has been a great partner in all of this. I'm very proud to sit on their board alongside Jennifer Hernandez. Her and I both presented on this issue at yesterday's advocacy meeting, and they will be quickly and expedient and very, very rapidly reviewing the VMT issue at their executive committee call coming up here. And we do hope that it passes. They have been instrumental in the Central Valley with the ag component, trying to move VMT resolution with the governor and asking for a 2-year delay there. So we're asking for a 1-year delay, but we would be happy with either. So we've also gotten a lot more traction with the cities and businesses in the County of Los Angeles. We've gotten a lot of people from our meetings who are interested in different partnerships from the San Gabriel Valley up into the Santa Clarita Valley and through Ventura. So we have a large area, but we are getting a lot of traction and a lot of support. That's my quick VMT update. I will go through our jurisdictions as quickly and thoroughly as possible. In the city of Los Angeles, we are lucky in a sense that, unfortunately, because of COVID and obviously with the much of the protests and unrest happening, the city is very focused on all of their meetings being around COVID legislation right now. They have stopped their council committee meetings. They do have their area planning committee meetings still going for projects, and they do have their planning commission still going, but their council committees have stopped, which has been a breath of fresh air for us. But I have spoken with many of the chiefs of staffs for the council members, and about in a month, we are going to see those committees return, which brings us to the point that we might see that wood construction motion come back. For those of you that are unaware, it's been a 5-year effort to bring this motion through. Councilmember Blumenfield and Councilmember Rodriguez are the motion makers on this. It would potentially eliminate different building type 4 and 5, which is wood construction, from 70% of the city. That's obviously completely detrimental to our industry and something we've been fighting and staving off for quite some time now. We believe that this effort will come back soon, but we are ready to continue through our advocacy efforts to fight that effort off as well. For more details, as we get them, we will let you know, but right now we only know that for 1 more month at least, we won't be seeing that come to fruition yet. Secondly, LA City, we've had many different stakeholder meetings. We sit on a quarterly meeting with the building and engineering department. They have moved very quickly to try to keep us updated on what they're going to do when they go back to in-person meetings for any kind of permitting and maps and fees you have to pay. I know there's been notary issues for wet signatures that have not been able to transcend the virtual process. So they spoke on that as well, and they're working on those issues. Secondly, the LADWP water stakeholder group, we are a part of as well. They updated us on their water quality issues that they're reviewing right now. It's a very robust process. And if you have any feedback on that, please let me know. We'd be happy to send it their way and communicate that with them. Thirdly, we're also on an MWD water working group with their integrated water resources plan that's focused on water reliability, which is extremely important to us as well. So please send any comments my way on that too. I'm going to move to the County of Los Angeles. The County of Los Angeles has been really great about moving to a completely virtual process. As many of you know, they've had EPIC, the online permitting processing for many years now, but it's been newly rolled out this year. So we were lucky in that aspect, and I think our builders have found less issues there. But when we do find issues, we try to troubleshoot them right away with planning. They've been very responsive, and we're lucky to have a strong relationship with them. In any case, inclusionary zoning will be coming up in July, on July 28th. This has been a very difficult fight for the last 2 years. The Planning Commission in April passed a more difficult ordinance than was before. Luckily, it doesn't appear to be hurting our members who are in the process of building or who have already had entitlements in the unincorporated county. That being said, as you know, and Jeff mentioned, LA County is hugely important in the region in kind of setting the bar for things. So we are very disappointed in where this inclusionary zoning ordinance has gone as far as its restrictiveness. They've changed the small project differentiation from 20 units to 15 units. There's a 95-year covenant on affordable projects. There are also issues related to equity share, which is unseen in any of the jurisdictions that I've worked in so far. So we are going to continue fighting it, but the good news in all of that is that it doesn't appear to be affecting anyone in the unincorporated Los Angeles County right now. But do let me know in the chat box. The second issue in LA County that we're facing has to do with climate action plan. obviously Los Angeles County has been at the forefront of sustainability planning. They do see themselves as a model for the smaller cities in all of Los Angeles County. This affects building, as you know, because they're trying to go above and beyond state building standards, Title 24 issues. They've already adopted things like we've already adopted things at the state, like mandatory solar panels, and we've adopted things at the county, like mandatory cool roofs. So we're already above and beyond what is expected related to sustainability measures, but the climate action plan could threaten that further, but the draft review did come out last month. We sent a robust comment letter. They did take our feedback in the fact that many of the things are incentive-based and revolve around rebates. So in LA County, that's a huge win for us, and we continue to work with the department to make sure that it doesn't negatively affect our builders. And the last thing I'll say on LA County that we're focused on is the art fee. That's the never-ending art fee. We've worked very closely with business stakeholders in all of LA County. We are able to continuously delay this item. This is one of those wildly unnecessary fees during this time of COVID, during the time that we're in a housing crisis. This would be a 1% valuation, building valuation fee on all residential development, with very few exemptions. So that is going to be heard in September. So we do have a little bit of time for that, and we hope to continue to delay it, particularly because of the economic realities we're facing. The last jurisdiction I'll cover really quickly is the County of Ventura. The County of Ventura, we've actually seen a few good things coming out of the county itself. They were the first county to reopen business at the large scale they are at. Obviously, places like Stanislaus and other counties opened ahead of Ventura, but in the Southern California region, they were the first large county to open, followed closely by Orange County. And then of course LA County. But that is a positive light because that did get their economy going, and they are struggling financially. So the city of Ventura, in the county of Ventura, actually was able to pass streamlined permitting processes, which is amazing. And it's really speaking to the time we're in. So if you have any questions on that, please let me know. The city of Oxnard unfortunately passed development impact fees. However, their fees had not been updated since 1970, and we were actually able to get a very robust grandfathering clause for anyone that's actually building in Oxnard, and able to get a really strong phase-in fee process. So we are proud of that component, despite the fact that they had to pass the fee because of that long time look. And then there's a few other things I have, but I know we're really running out of time here. We did get a good win in Torrance, focused on their development impact fees and trying to amend them with the same grandfathering clause. In South Pasadena, they did already pass the VMT, but we're working with their city. And lastly, I think I'll end there, and then we'll hand it over to Jeff and Steve. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the chat box, and I'll put my email address there as well.
Thank you, Diana. Well done. A lot going on in Los Angeles City and the county, and a lot more to come, and Ventura as well. Thank you. Last but not least, Stephen Lamont is with us, CEO of our Orange County chapter. And Steve and the Orange County chapter has done an amazing job, especially selfishly for the regions on SCAG and different things. They have really trailblazed ahead when it comes to reacting and acting very quickly. And other counties are starting to, maybe not always aligned on the issues, but in terms of the action, we're seeing more of an alignment as it pertains to trying to protect Southern California and our resources when it comes to government funding. So with that, Mr. Lamont, I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I know we're running short on time here, so I have a 30-minute presentation. I'll shrink down to about 25 minutes here. So bear with me, of course. No, but I know we have questions, and I'm going to try to get through this as quickly as possible. But I did just kind of want to echo what Jeff just said, specifically on the RTPSCS and the VMT issue. We're extremely fortunate to have our OC Council of Government, OCOG, if you will, which is our SCAG sub-delegation. I represent the private sector on that board. It's a non-voting seat, so I'm fortunate enough to be with that group just about every single month, of course, virtually at this point. And they were one of the first groups to come out in support of the delay for the RTP-SCS, and last week they did support the delay on the VMT implementation, of course, as a whole, as a whole for that jurisdiction, for that body. So kind of what Jeff was saying about kind of leading the way, that they do pretty much see things, more of a local control group, of course, but very aligned with what the BIA and the private sector have. So on that note, we are also, though, moving forward with a lot of cities that have supported the VMT implementation delay. Again, with OCOG, Laguna Niguel has officially already supported it. It'll go to the Irvine City Council. Actually, a resolution is already on the agenda for next week. Obviously, very important because it's one of our bigger cities, more powerful cities. Mission Viejo's taking it up. Huntington Beach is taking it up. Tustin, Anaheim, the county, Aliso Viejo have all responded saying they're looking now to get it on their agendas, hopefully in the very near future. And so we are gaining steam. I do appreciate some of you are in contact with your cities on this issue as well. Even back to the RTP issue, we had a lot of people from Orange County write their elected officials. I know this because their elected officials reached out to us and reached out to me and said, what the heck are all these emails? And so I really appreciate everyone's advocacy here. And so on the jurisdictional side, I got more of a positive update, believe it or not. We have many Orange County cities right now trying to figure out ways to boost economic activity. And thankfully, that is including development, of course. And so, again, more on the positive side, we've been calling into meetings for projects, policy issues. This new virtual public hearing process has been, in my opinion, much more positive. We deal, as everyone deals with, we have significant NIMBY opposition here in Orange County. Significant. There's not a council meeting I go to that has a project that doesn't have a couple hundred people screaming at the city council. We've sort of, unscientific. We've figured out one of the worst issues, or one of the main issues projects are being either reduced or denied, is because of the atmosphere in a room, the atmosphere in a public hearing. It's no science behind it. It's strictly emotion. And so the fact that we're in these virtual public hearings right now, all you're hearing is what the individuals are saying. You're not seeing the mob mentality. You're not seeing the severe emotion that goes behind it. And I kind of feel that their policy is being made. And so the virtual hearing process is it's rocky. It's off to a rocky start, but in my opinion, it's been positive. I get to have dinner with my family and still get to attend a city council meeting on the phone or virtually, of course. And so I'm going to go down this list here, but Anaheim is an economic stimulus package first. They did a lot of things within this package, but they were looking at delaying and waiving certain development fees. They are discussing parking regulations here soon. I'm hoping it's going to go in the right direction. Another big issue, actually, something that, in my time in the BI, I never thought I would see, but 5 years ago, or 2016, 4 years ago, the city of Costa Mesa passed Measure Y, which is a Palafox zoning measure. To an extent, a de facto ban on development. You don't need a lot of signatures in cities like this to get these things on the ballot. And then you put an anti-development initiative on the ballot, it's probably going to pass. And it did, 2-1. And so we now have a city council that can't get anything done. They have areas of the city they want to refurbish. They have actually projects they want to see built, and they can't do it because it would have to go to a vote of the people. And obviously that's just only going to add time, uncertainty, and a lot of cost to a project. So a lot of people haven't been moving forward, and they've told the city why. It's because of Measure Y. The city council would have to send any change to a vote of the people. And so they've been mulling this over for a couple of weeks. Ultimately, nothing has happened just yet. So I do encourage anyone who lives or works in the city of Costa Mesa to please write your city council and say we would love to see amendments to Measure Y. Fullerton passed an ordinance that temporarily defers collections of specific development impact fees from building permit issuance until issuance of temporary certificate of occupancy or final COO. That was in response to actually one of our board members worked with the city to try and get that done. So kudos to Fullerton. Mission Viejo also did the same, approved the residential building permit fee waiver program for 120 days, followed by a 50% reduction in fees for an additional 60-day period. Santa Ana, this is actually a pretty big one. City of Santa Ana passed an inclusionary zoning policy. Actually, they didn't pass it, they updated it back in 2015, I believe. They had a fee that was kind of averaging $7 to $9 per square foot, upped it to $15 per square foot, again, in the city of Santa Ana. Over the last 5 years, they have had thousands of entitled units and units in the pipeline, and not one has paid the fee. So over this time, the fee, literally, I mean, the correlation is staggering. As soon as this fee was updated, building stopped. A lot of interest in the city, and there's no argument there, but the fee is not being paid. And so they are actually looking now to amend their inclusionary zoning policy, and we're talking thousands of units that could potentially be in the pipeline. We were lucky enough to have several BIA members call in to the city council meeting this week. The agenda item was strictly to find ways to help construction in the city. And so we have been trying to get them to go to the inclusionary zoning, which they have agreed to now look at and come back with some options in a couple weeks. And so you will most likely see some emails from me. We do want to see BIA members call in. We had several board members call in, offer their expertise on this policy. And you know what? There were also a lot of union members calling in as well, who also want to see something happen. Hopefully it's again, in alignment with us in terms of where we want to see this policy go. But we have asked for a 2-year pause on this policy. And it seems as if there is a lot of support from what we heard from the city council. And so this would be a massive impact to the city of Santa Ana. Again, we're talking about thousands of units that could potentially be in the pipeline here. And so stay tuned. But, you know, in Orange County, I mean, we're talking about a city like Santa Ana could possibly have a freeze on their inclusionary zoning for 2 years. Huge, huge deal. So stay tuned. Santa Ana also had a recall recently. One of their council members, CC Iglesias, was just recalled and replaced with the new council member Mendoza, I believe. And so, you know, kind of a interesting change there. But something to keep an eye on, of course. And let's see, projects are still moving forward. Stanton, KB just got a project approved in City of Stanton, so congratulations. Anaheim's got a project going to City Council next week. You might see an email from me looking for some support letters. We will also be commenting. Been supported desalinization projects, other projects in Santa Ana, you name it. Nothing has really slowed down on the project side, which is a good thing. Last but not least, one of the bigger kind of issues here in Orange County that you might see mostly in the news is some of the CARES Act money that has been given to the county that is supposed to be going down to small businesses. The supervisorial districts have tried to give that money out differently. Some districts have already started giving the money out. Some districts want to wait for an administrator to distribute the money over possibly the next couple months. I am chair of the South Orange County Economic Coalition, and we did a survey of many businesses in South Orange County. The majority of those who answered our survey were businesses that have been in business for over 10 years. And one of the staggering factors was that the majority of those who were also surveyed can only last about another 1 to 2 months under these current conditions. So our message to the county is to let's get this money out, let's get reopened a lot quicker. And again, that's not specifically related to the building industry just itself, but just business in general. I think is something that again we want to see. I am the PAC administrator. Elections are not going to be canceled. We are moving our PAC event to September. So please contribute to the PAC. Please don't hesitate to also reach out to us if you know any elected officials you want us to have on our radar. Any theories, any ideas you have, please reach out. I also sit on 3 other PACs here in Orange County. So we do have our fingers, in many different pots, if you will, and we are paying attention to just about every race in Orange County. And then lastly, which should be announced soon, but we'll have our economic webinar coming up June 16th. We are fortunate enough to have Leonard Miller, CEO of the new home company, moderate. We're having Dr. Schwartz from UCI and Tim Sullivan with Myers Research on the panel. So pretty excited there. With that, that's my update. Very quickly, of course. Yeah, back to you.
Thank you, Steve. I know this has been a long webinar, but we wanted to make sure moving forward, because we have Zoom technology, that there's no reason why if you're with one chapter, you can't find out what's going on with another chapter. So we're trying to do things more in a collaborative effort, because we definitely need to share notes, especially what's going on in our industry. With that, are there any, I know we tried to answer as many questions as we could during the call. If there's more questions, you could type them in now while we have some of our panelists still here. If not, you can email us directly. We greatly appreciate your participation with the BIA. If you are a builder, next you're going to be getting an invitation for a TASMAP review. What Rich and Andy are working on, and Jennifer Hernandez as rest as a coalition on the SCAG land use planning. It's going to be something that's going to be very important. So if you are a builder, you'll be getting that invitation. It'll be a builder only. And then we'll also be doing government affairs more frequently and break it out, not just by the areas, but doing things in more collaborative effort. So with that, I want to thank everybody for participating. I expect to hear from us soon, and everybody have a good weekend. Thank you.